I'm creating this video to kind of accompany section 6.5 part B, specifically the part dealing with using the graphing calculator to create sinusoidal regression lines, or a sine regression line. And the basic concept of a sinusoidal regression is if we have a set of data and we plot that data. Let's take a look at just a simple example here. If we have a set of data and plot the points, and you see that it has kind of the cyclical nature, then your graphing calculator will come up with a line of best fit that will maybe not go through every point, but will come very closely to going through the points if it is indeed a sinusoidal type graph. And so I'm going to go directly into the homework, and questions number 15 and 20 are both requiring you to use your graphing calculator in order to answer these. And so I'm going to be using the TI84 Plus Silver Edition. If you have a different model like the TI83, you might see that some of the features are a little different, but I'll try to explain the differences and get you through regardless of which Texas Instrument model you have. So let's take a look at number 15. In this particular question, it's talking about the average monthly temperatures for a particular city. And you'll see month 1, which we can assume would be January. Most of the time it will tell you January equals 1, February would be 2, and so on. And you'll notice that the temperatures are lower in January. They gradually get higher into May, June, July, and then they start to go back down again all the way through December. And you'll see that that creates a sinusoidal pattern, so that every December and January you have your lowest temperatures, and then in the summer months you would see that the temperatures rise again. So what we want to start with is plotting these points on the calculator, and then we'll go from there to have the calculator create the line. So in order to do a scatter plot of this data, you need to go to Stat, Edit, and if you have data already in here, you can go to the top and hit Clear and push down, and that will delete the entire list. Or you can go to each data individually and hit Delete, which can be tedious if you have a really big list, but most of these are going to 12, so you can delete them one at a time. Whatever you do, don't go to the top and hit delete on the list, because you'll actually delete the list from your calculator. So list 1 by default in your calculator is representing the X's. So let's list 1 through 12 to represent the 12 months as our X values. Now the good thing about a video is if I go too fast, or if I lose you at a part, then you're able to stop it, rewind it as many times as you like. So L1 represents X, L2 represents our Y, so in this case Y would represent our temperatures. So starting with 36 for January, 39 for February, and so on. Now you need to be careful when entering data. It's very easy to skip over a data item or enter it twice. So when you're done, you need to make sure that you have the same number of items in list 1 as you do in list 2. And if you don't, your calculator will certainly tell you that that there's a mismatch. So we have those in the calculator, so we can go to Y equals at this point. And the quick way to turn your plots on is to go up to plot 1 and hit enter, and notice that it's now bold. And that's the way I generally turn on the plots. If you ever want to get more specific, you can go to second stat plot and go to number 1 here. Notice you can turn it off and on under this menu, but this is where you can get a little more specific with the type of graphs that you want. Your calculator will do a lot more than just the scatter plot like we like here. List 1 is X, list 2 is Y. That's where you can change what you want to define as X and Y. The marker, I generally use the box because it's the easiest to see. And if you have this particular edition, it will let you choose how you want your markers to appear. Otherwise, they'll just be black. So now that our plots are on, we want to have it display all of the data items. And so let's go to Zoom and down to number 9. Zoom Stat is a great feature because this way you don't have to set the window yourself. It will find the optimal window to make sure that all of these data items are plotted on the viewing window. So we go to Zoom Stat, number 9, hit enter, and notice it's not a perfect wave, but it does have close to a cyclical pattern here. So colder months and then peaks in the summer, as you might expect, and then so we want to have the graphing calculator fit the perfect line through that scatter plot. And it's a pretty sophisticated formula that is used to create this, and luckily we don't even have to get into that. It does all of the dirty work for us. And so in order to do this, let's go back to our main menu, hit quit second mode, and that'll always get you back to the main menu. Now we want to go to Stat. This time we're going to the Calc menu, and this is where all the regression lines are held. If you've had college algebra, you've done many of these before, like a linear regression, quadratic, cubic, logarithmic, exponential, and so on. We want to go down to C. This is your Sine Regression, and hit enter. Now this is where it's going to look different for different models of the calculator. Iterations, it defaults to 3. I think it goes up to 16, and it basically is how precise the calculations will be. And so if you go up to 16, it may take your calculator 5 minutes to calculate it. So they say that 3 is pretty standard and will give us pretty accurate results. So I would leave it at 3. List 1, list 2, that's fine. Period, if you know the period of the graph, you can enter that. In this case, it would be 12 because there's a period of 12 months. But a lot of times I like to just leave that alone. That way we can let the calculator do all the calculations. And plus, if we mess with that, it may not match exactly what they're asking for in my math lab. Now, store regression equation, if you have that option, we can have it actually store it into our y equals at this point. What we need to do is go to vars and go over to yvars function number 1, hit enter, and here's all of our y's. We want to use y1, and that will automatically store it in our y1, and then hit enter again. Now if you didn't have all of those features, just hit enter until it gives you a summary of all the values. And this is the actual A, B, C, and D that you would plug into this equation, and it's the same thing it's wanting here. So let's type these in. For A, it says round to the nearest hundredth as needed, so 13.13. Now remember, A is your amplitude, because when we're plugging it into this formula, A represents amplitude. B, 0.53. C is negative 2.24, and D is 49.90. And sometimes these are kind of hard to interpret, so I wouldn't worry too much about what the numbers represent, because remember, we just want the calculator to model this data. So we check our answer, and it says that it's correct. Now, I've done this before where sometimes at the end of your values you'll see an E. Say it'll say e to the -4 power. That means move your decimal 4 places to the left. Anytime you see an E at the end, that means your number is a very, very small number and would basically equate to 0. And I did run into that one time with one of the random generations of this. So just be aware of that. Alright, now if we go to y equals, notice because of where we had it state the equation or store the equation, it already has all of this plugged in for us into this formula. Now, if you were unable to get it to do that, I'm just going to hit clear here. You can still have it insert the formula. In fact, if you have a TI84, you may have to have it insert it this way. Go to Y1, go back to vars, your variable stats. This time we want to go down to number 5, hit enter, and go over to EQ. Notice it's got regression equation. We want to choose that, and this time it entered it manually. Now, if you didn't do this regression equation, you would literally have to type these numbers in and put it into that form, which takes a little bit of time. So I always like to have the calculator do that for me. Now once that's in there, let's hit graph, and notice it's not an exact perfect fit. It doesn't go through all of the points, but it does create a pretty close model. And so the second part of the question, it's going to ask you to match it, and then if you've done all of this, the matching part should be pretty easy. So I say that, and then it looks, both of these are pretty similar. I would say that this one is probably correct. So just remember, if you have problems with these, you can always email me. You can use the Ask My Instructor tab. That's the best one to do. Anytime you click on that, it sends me an email and it gives me the exact problem. So you just need to tell me where you're having trouble, and I can certainly respond from there.